Hey guys, welcome to Overload the Middle. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive analysis on Viktor Gyökeres versus Alexander Isak. Both strikers deadly. Alexander Isak, his numbers in the Premier League speak for themselves. You know, Viktor Gyökeres, his numbers in the Portuguese league for the last 2 seasons, but most importantly, his numbers in the Champions League and his numbers in international football for Sweden, also speak loudly. So let's look at the two of them and let's try to figure out who is the deadliest striker. Looking at Viktor Gyökeres, first of all, he comes in with a pace at 92. He comes in with a shooting of 87, which is very high. We look at Isak. Isak comes in at a pace of 88 and a shooting of 88. Very, very close. You got 88 shooting 88 versus 87 on shooting and 92 in pace. Extremely close to the point where you can't even call it right now, Looking at passing, and I was surprised about this because I thought maybe Isak was a far superior passer. But Isak only comes in at 75 in passing versus Gyökeres, who comes in at 74. Now, a lot has been made in the media this summer in regards to Gyökeres not being maybe technically of the level Arsenal are used to. Arsenal are used to the very highly technical work in the pocket type of strikers like your Gabriel Jesus, like your Kai Havertz, strikers who are more, in my mind, attacking midfielders, than actual out-and-out strikers. And I was assuming that Isak, being a little bit more refined and looking at what what Newcastle are asking for Liverpool of 120 mil. I was expecting his passing to be at least 80, but it's coming in at 75, which, okay, we'll look at the vision numbers in a minute to see how that translates. Okay, going on to dribbling, Gyökeres has a dribbling of 83 versus Isak's 88. Now, I'm not surprised at that because, the eye test can definitely tell us that when it comes to dribbling, Isak is supreme, He played a lot of his football on the left wing as well. So we know that dribbling comes very natural to him. Where Gyökeres he can dribble, but I've more seen him, especially in terms of looking at YouTube clips, etc. I've seen him knock the ball past players and run and work the channels, especially down the left-hand side and run. Yes, he might kind of go past one player, but going past several players, I've not seen that. So his dribbling coming at 83 kind of confirms what the eye test tells you as well. Looking at their physical attributes, Gyökeres is coming in at 92, which is really, really good. Isak is coming at only 78, which I was quite surprised because, to look at them, you can see that Isak is definitely a more slender build, and you can see Gyökeres is definitely more of a powerhouse, flat track bully type of build. And let's not talk about when when Gyökeres decides to take his top off in celebration. The guy is built like a house. Yeah, very, very Ronaldo-esque. Let me just put it that way in terms of how he's built. I don't know why. Maybe I assume because it's that playing in the Premier League and he's doing so well that his physical would be a little bit higher. But to be fair, 78 is only 2 points of 80. We're talking about a gap of 14 points? That's a lot. One of the things that I find interesting is there's a lot of commentary that, Gyökeres can, bully defenders in the Portuguese league, but can he do it in the Premier League? And I don't know, sometimes I find that a little bit disingenuous because I think about the Champions League game against Arsenal where even though Gyökeres didn't score in the night, he gave Saliba, Gabriel and Kivior a torrid time. I think that the only two strikers that I've seen, Saliba, Gabriel, really, really how can I put it, uncomfortable with, would be Isak and Gyökeres. Isak, when Newcastle, many times Newcastle would have have played Arsenal. Newcastle seem to have Arsenal's number last season. Isak scored at St James's Park. I believe he also scored at the Emirates as well. And you can see Isak Isak had Saliba on his toes, had Gabriel on his toes. And in fairness, I can't say, trying to be as unbiased as possible. Although looking at the game against Sporting against Arsenal, although Gyökeres gave Saliba and Gabriel a difficult night, I don't think he gave them as difficult night as Isak, because it was almost like Saliba and Gabriel were scratching their head against Isak in terms of how do we contain him, how do we keep him quiet. Whereas with Gyökeres, Gyökeres was stretching them, his runs. The only thing I think Gyökeres needs to do better, and I'm sure Mikel Arteta will train him to do, is to use his arms more effectively, especially in terms of holding back the defender without causing a foul. So using his arms to shield the ball, to shield the defender from the ball, he needs to do that a little bit better, because he's definitely got the strength to do that. So I would say, both, I'm sure if you were to interview both Gabriel and Saliba and ask them who was your toughest opponent last season, they would definitely say Isak, and I think they would say Gyökeres. I think they would say it because, as I said, Gyökeres smashed the post against them. Didn't score, but gave them a torrid time. Okay, moving on. Let's look at some of Gyökeres' physical attributes in a little bit more detail. He has an acceleration of 89, which to me is amazing. Isak comes in at 87, which, to be honest with you, they're both the same in terms of the acceleration. Isak with an agility of 84 versus Gyökeres at 83. Jumping, funny enough, Gyökeres has a jumping of 95, although he hasn't scored any goals with his head last season. But he's definitely very, based on obviously FC25. And again, if you want to check out, more real life stats, you've got FC Ref, you've got transfermarket.com. But for me, when I look at games like FC25 as well as games like Football Manager, they're probably the most realistic in terms of statistics that will give you a snapshot of players' attributes. It's one thing to kind of know how many goals players scored last season and what their goals to shot ratio was, but when you're looking at, okay, what are their attributes and how highly are they ranked for attributes? FC25 and Football Manager are definitely the top two go-tos in that regard. So I'm surprised to see Gyökeres with a jumping of 95. When I look at Isak, he's got a jumping of 90, and that doesn't really surprise me because he scores quite a few goals with his head. As I said, remembering the goal he scored against Arsenal with his head at St James's Park. So he's definitely got a good leap on him. Sprint speed is coming in at 88 versus Gyökeres, who's coming in at 94, which is interesting. I don't know why, but to me, it feels like Isak looks more like if you were to use an analogy, Isak looks like the greyhound. The way that he's built, very slender build, you'd think he'd have a higher sprint speed than Gyökeres, who looks like the wrestler, very built, but has a sprint speed faster than Isak at 94 versus 88. That's a big jump. We're talking a 6 points between the two here. So that's really interesting. Isak's coming in with a stamina 81 versus Gyökeres, who's coming in at 94. Now that's not surprising because he can sprint for long distances. You got some players who they can sprint for like really fast over the first 10, 20 yards, but then they'll slow down. But Gyökeres is a marathon sprinter. He can sprint for days and keep the same speed, not slow down, which for me is an amazing asset to have. Right. So we looked at strength already. Looking at aggression, Gyökeres is coming in at 90. Now that is interesting because for me, coming in at 90 is giving me he's gonna pick up a few red cards this season because there's no way, the Premier League is already in a very aggressive, very intense league. He's coming from a league which is the opposite of that, and he's the highest goal scorer in that league. But when he comes to the Premier League, the defenders are going to give as good as they get. And one of the things that he's got to watch out for, and Arteta needs to, really kind of talk to him about and give him a heads up is that both defenders and referees are going to test him. They're going to test him. They're going to see how far they can go with him before he snaps. And referees, we know the referees, the referees in the Premier League are controversial at best, especially when it comes to Arsenal. So we know that the referees are not going to give Gyökeres the benefit of the doubt in anything. So he's definitely going to need to control his temperament. And when we compare it with Isak is coming with aggression at 64, which is really where you want it. You don't want it too low, but then you don't want it too high. And an aggression of 90, even Kai Havertz has an aggression of 57. Yeah. So aggression of 90, it's one of those things. It's like, I remember when, people would talk about, back in the day, they'll talk about Ian Wright's temperament. And they would say he wouldn't be the player that he was if he didn't have that temperament where, now and again he would snap. Now and again he would just see red mist. And he needed to play on that edge to gain the edge and to gain that sharpness that he had in front of goal. A lot of pundits, etc. would say, take that edge, take that aggressiveness away from Ian Wright, he'd be half the player than he was. And I would say the same for Gyökeres. I would say even before he's even kicked a ball, he's shown his aggressive nature, both in terms of being very resolute that he wants Arsenal and only Arsenal, being very resolute that he ain't coming back to training, that he's going on strike, very resolute over that, and very determined to, he talks about going to the Premier League as his revenge. And I wondered to myself, why would playing in the Premier League be your revenge? Because it's not like you played there before. Yes, you played in the Championship, but you've not really tasted the Premier League to say revenge. I think for him, very much so, it's similar to, again, Ian Wright's story, because he got he signed for Arsenal at 28, 29, and he knew that he only had a short window of time at the very, very top, playing for a top club. And this is the same for Gyökeres. He knows that this is his last big contract, and his last opportunity at a big club that are challenging for honours. Yes, he could go to Man United, but Man United are not ready to challenge for at least another 5 years. Minimum. So he knows that City already have Haaland. Liverpool were showing interest in Gyökeres, but now have Ekitike after trying to go for Isak. I will talk about Liverpool in a minute because, it's very interesting in how they're going about their business. But yeah, so he's got to have to learn to keep that in check, because if not, it may be problematic moving forward. So that gives me a little red flag. But it depends on how he channels his aggression. If his aggression is channeled in terms of goals, no problem. But if it's channeled in frustration or channeled in, getting into situations that he doesn't need to get himself into, then that's something that needs to be looked at. Okay, so moving on. Composure, 86 for Gyökeres, which is really good. Isak's coming in at 88, which again, there's nothing in it, 2 points. Now this is the one that really interested me. Isak is coming in with a vision of 80, and Gyökeres is coming with a vision of 81. As you can see, I'm doing a save at the moment, and one of the things I've noticed is that Gyökeres can pick a pass. This guy is creative. Now I'm not going to turn around and say he is Odegaard level creative, and I'm not, or Ozil level creative, but for the fact that he's been touted as this flat track bully, he will just knock defenders over and score goals. There's a lot more to his game, and people are going to be surprised at the amount of assists that he gets this season. His chance creation stats are going to be very, very high. Played with him for a couple of seasons now, not only on this save, but I've created other saves as well. And this guy can pick a pass, really pick a pass, and his visions, I didn't expect his vision stats to be that high. I was expecting maybe, 74, 75 by 81. Really, really good. Really impressed about that. So moving on. So his finishing is coming in at 89. Isak is coming in at 91. Nothing in it, guys. Nothing in it. And, one of the things I will say is that, yes, the season hasn't started yet. We don't know how. Right now, we don't even know if we'll get the player because, there's still nitpicking over the add-ons and how the add-ons will be paid, etc. I'm sure it will be done, but once Gyökeres starts the season, it will be interesting to see how he gets on, because if we're looking at how much Arsenal are purchasing for, which is, what is it, 63.5 million euros, which is like 55 million quid, plus another 10 million in add-ons, which is like, no, not even 10 million, 8 million pounds in add-ons, which comes out to, 63.5, 64 million pounds, versus Isak, where, Newcastle are quoting north of 120 million. 120 million is the minimum that they would accept, but you could easily see it go up to 150 million. Now, for me, again, just looking at the stats we've looked at so far, Arsenal are getting the bargain of the decade. When this deal goes through, and I'm saying when because I know it will happen, it's just a matter of time. Arsenal are getting the bargain of the decade. 64 million versus 150 million for Isak, and they're very close in terms of quality. Extremely close. Let's look at long shots for Isak is 80, Gyökeres 82 long shots. Penalties 81 for Gyökeres, 87. Okay, he's definitely got the upper hand on penalties, Isak, but 81 is very good as well. And as we've seen in the Portuguese league, he's been banging penalties away. He's been banging them away for fun, basically. Ball control 84 versus 89. Now this is a stat that I thought I was a little surprised with, because again, a lot has been made of Gyökeres' technical weaknesses. They're saying that sometimes his first touch is off. Two things that have come out with Gyökeres. First of all, one, that his first touch isn't always as clean as it could be, and the second thing is that he needs or requires too many touches before he takes a shot. And he's going to learn very quickly in the Premier League that literally you're going to get 2 touches in max. 1 to control the ball and 2 to strike the ball. Now, in Gyökeres' credit, he's not shy at taking shots. He will take shots all day, every day. So he's not shy about that. And that was, for me, probably one of the things that I was happy about in the fact of getting Gyökeres, is that his shot volume is incredibly high. Especially when you compare it against someone like Sesko, who's a little bit more shot shy, just a little bit more. So yeah, one of the things that have been kind of talked about with Gyökeres is that he's not as technically gifted as a typical Arsenal player. He doesn't have that clean first touch. Sometimes the ball bobbles on first touch. Another criticism is that he needs too many touches before he takes a shot at goal. But one of the things that he's gonna have to learn very quickly is that he's gonna have maximum 2 touches on the ball. 1 to control the ball, and 2 to take the shot. He's not gonna be able to take 2 or 3 touches before taking the shot. It's gonna be control, bang. And I feel like, with a little bit of training from Arteta, I think he'll get there very quickly. And again, I'm surprised that his ball control stats are coming in 84, because, as I said, this is something that has been a critique for Gyökeres, and that he doesn't always have the cleanest of touches. He doesn't always have the ability to be as technically sound as other players. But I'm at 84. I'm actually quite impressed. Let's see how well that translates in real life, but I'm surprised that your FC25 gave him a ball control of 84. Looking at Isak, ball control of 89 doesn't surprise me. Very technically clean on the ball. Doesn't need very clean, close first touch. Doesn't need many touches to manipulate the ball. So that doesn't really surprise me as much. Is there anything that surprises me? All right, let's have a look at his shot power. Isaac's shot power is 91. Oh, that's a surprise. Gyökeres' shot power is only 88. I would have thought it was the other way around. I was expecting Gyökeres to come in at least a 90 on shot power, because he has a powerful shot. And Isak, maybe I've underestimated his shot power. I know that because when you think of Isak, you think of those finesse shots, the Henry-esque type shots, which are curled to the the bottom far corner. You think of you don't really associate Isak with hard shots. But that's interesting. Okay, good to know that. Anything else on the list? All right. So another thing I wanted to talk about, because this has been talked about so much, and kind of, I don't know, people have kind of got it twisted. People are talking about, well, Gyökeres is from Portugal. We know the Portuguese league isn't that great. He's how can I put it? He's playing, League One football, or the equivalent of League One football in Portugal. So we don't really know what he's capable of doing in the Premier League. Okay, that's a fair argument. Everybody, and I definitely do. Everyone has Darwin Núñez PTSD. Let's call a spade a spade. Let's be honest now. Everybody has Darwin Núñez PTSD. Darwin Núñez came from Benfica. Liverpool bought him for like 85 million pounds. At that time, I think that was about 100 million euros, or very close to. He looked like the real deal until he kicked the ball, and we realized very, very quickly that they bought a dud. Let's just put it that way. To the point where now this summer they're looking at getting rid of him. They've bought in a Ekitike, and they're looking at getting rid of Núñez. So everybody in the world of football has this Darwin Núñez PTSD. With the whole question is Viktor Gyökeres going to be Darwin Núñez Mark II? Is he going to be the same? So let's look at his performances outside of Portugal. In the last few years. Let's start with his international performances. So Isak's been playing for Sweden since 2019, achieving milestones like the youngest goal scorer and accolades like forward of the year. Gyökeres made his impact back in I think it was 2023. I think Gyökeres made his impact, or his debut, I should say, in 2023, often playing in the same lineup as Isak, forming an effective strike partnership. Although they're competitors, because they, depending on how Sweden set up, but they've played together a lot of times for Sweden. So if we look at their numbers, let's have a quick look at their numbers. Isak debuted March 23rd, 2019. He came on as a sub against Romania at the age of 19. He's accumulated 52 caps for Sweden and scored 16 goals in 52 games. Interesting. Looking at Gyökeres made his first senior appearance in 2023. He's accumulated since then 26 caps and scored 15 goals. So then my question is why? Why is it that basically Gyökeres has scored more or less the same amount of goals, but in a much quicker time? As I said, Gyökeres had made his debut in 2023, so 2 years ago, and he scored 15 goals in 2 years, and it's taken Isak 6 years to score 16 goals. Why is that? Why isn't Isak's Premier League form replicated at international level? Doesn't necessarily mean now that Gyökeres is a better player because he scored more or less the same amount of goals in 2 years versus Gyökeres in 6 years? No, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily mean that. But then, you do get some players, and, it's probably one of the wonders of the world where you get a player that will do so great for their club, but can't replicate their form for their country. And it looks like Gyökeres has been able to do both, take his club form into the international stage, and really has shown that, it's not just a case of, as they say, Portuguese tax. The goals that he scored isn't just Portuguese tax. Yes, don't get it twisted. The Portuguese league is an easy league, hands down. However, he's shown that he can do it at international level. Then there are going to be someone saying, well, who is he playing? What kind of teams is he playing against, especially in like the Nations League and stuff like that? He can only play what's in front of him, And to be fair, if we're going to talk about level of opponent, let's talk about the Champions League. Let's move on to that because, I wanna look at all of the different levels of analysis that we can look into. So in the Champions League, Viktor Gyökeres last season made 8 appearances and scored 6 goals in 8 appearances. Now, for me, the Champions League is the creme de la creme. it's the pinnacle of football. So Viktor Gyökeres made his first appearance in the Champions League in the 24-25 season. He made 8 appearances and scored 6 goals. The highlight being a hat-trick against Manchester City in the stand-up 4-1 win. And the first sporting player in the Champions League era to net a hat-trick. And only the second Swede to do so since Ibrahimovic, which is interesting. Very interesting. All right. So the argument that, well, we're paying Arsenal have to contend with the Portuguese tax, and the fact that, you know, there are question marks of whether, you know, his skill set can transfer into the Premier League. Well, if you can do it in the Champions League, surely, and especially against, at the time, the champions of England, Man City, yeah, because they won the league at the end of the 23-24 season. So then again, when we look at the thing about statistics is that people are very quick to make assumptions, and the thing is, you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just look at it from a point of view of, okay, well, yes, he scored a ton of goals in Portugal, but that doesn't matter because the Portuguese league is like League One. So then if that's the case, why is he scoring in the Champions League? You know, 6 and 8. If that's the case, why is he scoring? How is it that he scored 16 goals, you know, in a 2-year period where Isak, let's not forget, is going north of 120 million, between 120 and 150 million. Newcastle are pricing him at. I only scored 1 goal in the Champions League. The math ain't mathing. Because yes, he's great in the Premier League, but then why is it that he only scored 1 in 5? You know, but yet no one's talking about nobody. And I'll be honest, I was actually surprised learning about this because no one talks about how he did in the Champions League. Not last season, the season before last. Because obviously Aston Villa were in the Champions League last season. I'm talking 2 seasons ago, which would have been the 23-24 season. Yeah. So no one really has spoken about why Isak only scored 1 in 5. But when we look at the stats, you know, looking at the stats here on FC25, you can't split them. Both ambidextrous, you know, left foot, right foot don't matter. Both, you know, shooting of 87, shooting of 88, pace of 88, pace of 92, vision of 81, vision of 80 for Isak and 81 for Gyökeres. You know, you can't split them. Acceleration of Isak 87, acceleration of Gyökeres 89. The only attribute where Isak is head and shoulders over Gyökeres is dribbling, where Isak is at an 88 and Gyökeres is an 83. But even then, we're talking what, 5 points? 5 points is a lot. And when it comes to dribbling, you know, he's 83 is still very good. Let's not beat around the bush. But Isak is coming in at 88. So that's, for me, that's the only area that I see that there's a big difference between the two players. Otherwise, it's close, man. And I feel like this is the reason why there's an anxiety within the Arsenal fan base for Arsenal to get this deal over the line ASAP. Because I don't know why they're haggling over, you know, give Sporting what they want, man. Because if you've already got the deal down to £64 million all in. If it means that you make that last 10 million easily, those last 10 million add-ons easily obtainable, don't cut your nose to spite your face. Because really and truly, and you know, there's only like a year and a couple of months age gap between the two players. So it's not like Isak is coming in, you know, extremely younger than Gyökeres, for example. Really and truly, no cap. Arsenal should be paying minimum. In this current market for Gyökeres level striker, Arsenal should be paying minimum £100 million. Minimum. Not euros, pounds, sterling, you know. Even at 110, you know, even playing this game, you're hard pressed to get Gyökeres under 100 million in the game. No, typically you can pick up Gyökeres in this game between 100 and 120 million. Yeah. So why is Arsenal right now nickel and diming over little add-ons that really and truly just make it easy for them. Let them get their money. They can be happy, and let's get the player in and let's get him over, to preseason training as soon as possible. That's my take on it. But looking at the evidence in front of me, so who will be top goal scorer between Gyökeres and Isak? It's gonna be tight. Obviously Isak will have the advantage of being Premier League experience and having that experience, but let's not forget Gyökeres was playing in the Championship. Yeah, so he's got that experience of English football. Maybe not at the Premier League level, but he definitely knows what English football is about. And there's an argument to say that the Championship football is even more physical than Premier League football. So he's ready. He knows what to expect. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season. And on that topic, what I'm going to be doing, because as you can see, I've got Gyökeres, I've got Isak in the same team. I've also got Rodrigo and Eze in the same team. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be literally doing the league campaign. This league campaign starts in the 26-27 season. As you can see, Gyökeres is a year older, Isak is a year older. But the only way I was going to get Rodrigo in this team, to be honest with you, is I needed to. I didn't have the money at the end, in the summer of this window. I needed to wait until next year's summer window to pick him up. So I did that. And what I want to be doing, I want to be seeing who's going to have the highest GA between Gyökeres and Isak. I'm also going to be doing one on Rodrigo versus Eze. It's a possibility that Arsenal don't get neither of Rodrigo and Eze. So I'm going to pause that one and wait and see. If we get either one of those players, I'll run it and see who become the highest goal scorer. The way I'm going to do it is that each game, each player will be rotated. So if Gyökeres starts the first game of the season, Isak will start the second game of the season, and so on and so forth. So that's something that look out for, and that's going to be coming real soon. So guys, having said all of that, who do you think will have the most goals at the end of the season? Isak or Gyökeres? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this in-depth analysis, and fingers crossed, Arsenal will be announcing him very soon, and he'll be off to pre-season training to meet up with the rest of the boys. Guys, again, appreciate you for rocking with me. Appreciate every love shown from comments, likes, subs, all of that good stuff. Much, much appreciated. And until next time, take care. Peace.